My name is Danielle Ridley. I'm 31 years old. The night my sister humiliated me in front of 50 people should have crushed me. It really should have. But instead, it did something far more dangerous. It stripped away every excuse I'd been using to protect the illusion of family. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that nothing exposes the fault lines in a family faster than money. Not grief, not illness, money. Especially when you're the one who has it and everyone else quietly decides they deserve it more. I wasn't always the successful one, no matter how my parents like to rewrite history now. I didn't grow up privileged, and I certainly didn't walk into adulthood with a safety net. I was the quiet daughter, the one who learned early that being easy to manage meant being tolerated. I stayed out of the way. I got decent grades, not the kind that earned applause, just good enough to avoid concern. I earned a scholarship, moved out at 18, and worked 2 jobs while studying computer science. I built my life quietly, deliberately, while no one was paying attention. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Ava Ridley, lived loudly. Ava is 3 years younger than me, and from as far back as I can remember, she was the center of gravity in our family. Bright, effortless, adored. The kind of girl who could make a mess and still walk away framed as misunderstood. My parents always insisted they loved us equally. They said it carefully, like a prepared statement, as if precision could replace truth. But equality was never about effort or accountability. It was about who made them feel good. Ava was photogenic, bubbly, magnetic. She knew exactly how to tilt her head when she wanted something, how to cry without ruining her makeup, how to turn disappointment into someone else's failure. When Ava didn't get into her first choice college, my parents blamed the admissions office. When she maxed out a credit card at 22, they paid it off and blamed predatory lenders. When I declined dinner because I had work early the next morning, I was called selfish. But when Ava skipped family gatherings because she was emotionally drained, she was praised for protecting her mental health. I learned early that peace came from silence, so I stayed quiet. I stayed useful. By my mid-20s, I had landed a contract role at a mid-sized tech firm. That contract became full-time. Full-time became leverage. And leverage became independence. A few years later, I started my own consulting company. Nothing flashy, no luxury posts, no curated success online. I lived below my means, drove the same car for 8 years, and kept my head down. Still, somehow the truth leaked out. Maybe my mother mentioned it casually. Maybe Ava overheard something she wasn't meant to. It doesn't matter. Once she knew, the dynamic shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't just Danielle anymore. I was a solution. At first, it was small. Can you cover dinner? I left my card in the car. Can you float me for this vet bill? I'll pay you back Friday. You're good with tech. Can you help my friends start up? They can't pay, but it'll be great exposure. And I said yes, too often, because part of me still wanted to be included, still wanted to believe that generosity could buy belonging. That if I gave enough, I'd finally be seen as more than the quiet daughter who disappeared and came back useful. I told myself I wasn't being used. I told myself this was just how families worked. The truth was I had become invisible in every way that mattered, except when someone needed something. I think the real turning point came about a year and a half ago during a large family dinner my parents hosted. They took group photos all night. I was right there, physically present, smiling when asked, helping when needed. But somehow, every photo happened when I was pouring drinks or clearing plates. I brushed it off, told myself I was overthinking, until I saw the photo my dad posted later that night. He had cropped me out of a candid shot, physically zoomed in, so only he, my mother, and Ava remained. The caption read, "Family is everything." That should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it settled quietly in my chest, like confirmation of something I'd always known but never said out loud. Still, I didn't confront anyone. I stayed distant, but I didn't cut ties. Part of me still hoped. And then Ava got engaged. That was when everything finally started moving toward the night that should have broken me and didn't. Ava met Brandon Collins on a rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place with overpriced cocktails and people who dressed like they wanted to be photographed even when no one was watching. She told the story so many times it became polished, rehearsed, trimmed of anything inconvenient. In her version, it was fate. In reality, it was 2 ambitious people recognizing the value of each other's image. Brandon checked all the boxes my parents cared about: corporate finance, Ivy League degree, confident smile that looked engineered rather than earned. He shook hands, firmly maintained eye contact, and laughed at my father's jokes like they were punchlines instead of rambling observations. On paper, he was perfect. Something about him always felt performative to me, like he was playing the role of fiancé instead of inhabiting it. But I never said that out loud. Criticizing Ava's choices in our family was social suicide. They got engaged 6 months in. The ring was massive, strategically photographed against sunsets and champagne flutes. My mother started planning before Ava even finished announcing it. Pinterest boards appeared, group chats multiplied. Every conversation turned into a countdown. At first, I stayed on the edges, observing, answering, when spoken to, keeping my distance. Then the requests started. They were gentle at the beginning, almost sweet. Ava asked if I could help build a small website for the wedding registry. "You're good at that stuff," she said, smiling like it was a compliment instead of an assumption. I agreed. It took me an afternoon. She didn't thank me, but she tagged me once in a story that disappeared 24 hours later. Next came the invitations. She wanted something custom, something clean but elevated. Her words. When she asked if I could design them, I hesitated. I told her I was busy. She pouted just enough for my mother to notice. A week later, my mom called. She didn't start with the ask. She never did. She talked about how stressed Ava was, how much pressure weddings put on young women, how Brandon's family had certain expectations. Then carefully, she mentioned the venue. "There's just a small gap," she said. "Ava's dream place has a payment deadline non-refundable. They're a little short." "How short?" I asked. There was a pause. 25,000. I didn't laugh. I wish I had. Instead, I stared at my kitchen counter and felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that came whenever family and money entered the same sentence. "I need to think about it," I said. I don't know why I didn't say no. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the lingering belief that one big sacrifice could finally shift how they saw me. That if I did this, if I showed up in a way that couldn't be ignored, things would change. I wired the money 2 days later. No contract, no formal agreement, no thank you card. Just silence, followed by a brief text from Ava, "You're a lifesaver." For about 2 weeks, things felt better. Ava sent me updates about flowers and menus. My mom added me to a family group chat. My dad even called me one night just to ask how work was going. It felt temporary, like borrowed warmth, and I was right. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for the night before the wedding at an upscale garden restaurant just outside the city. Fairy lights live, violinist, everything, designed to look intimate and expensive. Ava looked stunning. I'll give her that. She had a way of commanding attention that made people lean in without realizing they were doing it. I stayed near the back, holding a drink, avoiding conversations that felt like auditions. When Ava stood to give a toast and began handing out small white boxes to the wedding party, I didn't expect anything. Technically, I wasn't in it. She moved down the line, smiling, hugging, sharing little anecdotes. When she reached me, she paused, looked me over, and smiled in a way that felt sharp instead of warm. "Oh," she said lightly, tilting her head. "You're not really part of the family anymore, remember?" The table went silent. Brandon laughed awkwardly. My mother cleared her throat. I felt heat rise to my face, but I didn't react. I asked her to repeat herself calmly. She laughed again. "Relax, Danielle. I'm just teasing. You always take things so seriously." But there was something in her tone, that familiar edge she used when she wanted to remind me where I stood. I nodded, took a sip of my drink, and excused myself. Outside, the night air felt cold against my skin. I walked down a small garden path, away from the lights and laughter, and pulled out my phone. I called my bank. "Hi," I said quietly. "I need to cancel a wire transfer. It was made under misleading circumstances." As the agent walked me through verification, I could hear laughter drifting from the patio behind me, glasses clinking, the violinist transitioning into something upbeat, Ava's voice rising above the others. Something shifted in me as I stood there listening. Not anger, not yet, just clarity. When I returned to the party, no one noticed I'd been gone. By the time I stepped back onto the patio, the cake had already been cut. The photographer was corralling people into place. Voices overlapping chairs, scraping against stone as groups reorganized themselves with practiced efficiency. Ava stood at the center of it all, glowing, laughing, directing everyone like a conductor who'd memorized the score long before the music started. No one asked where I'd been. I rejoined the edge of the crowd, smiling when someone made eye contact, nodding when a server passed with a tray. I played my part well. I always had. The quiet one. The reliable one. The one who didn't make scenes. Inside my chest, something had gone very still. I stayed until the end of the dinner. I even helped the planner load boxes into the back of a van when the night wrapped up. It was easier that way. Leave without spectacle. Deny them the satisfaction of calling me dramatic. The next morning, I woke up to a message from my mother. Mom, hey, honey. It was so nice seeing you last night. Ava said you seemed a little distant. Everything okay? Big weekend coming up? I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Ava said you seemed distant. Not Ava humiliated you. Not Ava crossed a line. Just a convenient version of events that placed the discomfort squarely back on me. I typed a reply, deleted it, tried again, deleted that too. Instead, I went for a long walk, grabbed coffee, and spent the afternoon scrolling through old text threads with Ava. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I needed proof that I wasn't imagining things. It was all there. Every conversation started with a request. Money, time, favors, emotional labor wrapped in emojis and LOL love you. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she thank me, without following it with another ask. The rehearsal dinner hurt, but it wasn't the breaking point. That came 2 days later at my parents' house. They were hosting a pre-wedding brunch and asked me to come early to help set up. I arrived on time with coffee for everyone like I always did, and walked in through the side door without knocking. The kitchen smelled like waffles and scrambled eggs. My mother stood at the stove in a floral apron. My father was fiddling with the speaker system in the dining room. Morning, I said. My mom glanced over her shoulder and smiled faintly. Oh, hi, Danielle. Could you actually help set the tables outside? Ava wants a garden layout. I nodded and carried the coffee straight through to the backyard. 2 folding tables were already half covered in linens and centerpieces. I spent the next 20 minutes arranging plates, cutlery, chairs, and water pitchers by myself. No one came out to help. By the time I finished, my hands were sticky with syrup and sweat. When I stepped back inside, Ava and Brandon had arrived. She was wearing a white sundress and oversized sunglasses, already posing for selfies with her bridesmaids. Brandon stood near my father, recounting something about his golf handicap like it was a personality trait. No one acknowledged me until Ava noticed the coffee tray. Oh, Danielle, she said, wrinkling her nose. I would have texted you. We all ordered oat milk lattes from that cute place near Brandon's office. I blinked. Okay. She turned away before I could finish the word. We sat down to eat. Conversations floated around me, loud and performative. Ava's friends laughed too hard at everything Brandon said. My parents nodded along, smiling in the way people do when they want everything to look harmonious from the outside. At one point, Ava leaned back in her chair and said, Brandon's parents have been so involved. It's been really nice having real family support through all this. She locked eyes with my mother. My fork froze midair. My mom laughed awkwardly. My dad cleared his throat. Well, we've tried our best. I mean emotional support, Ava added lightly, not just writing checks. I stood up. I didn't slam my chair. I didn't raise my voice. I picked up my plate, carried it into the kitchen, rinsed it, and walked out the side door. No one followed me. I sat in my car for 5 full minutes before turning the key. I wasn't angry. I was numb, like something essential had finally switched off. That night I didn't sleep. I combed through emails, bank confirmations, screenshots, favor after favor. I printed receipts and organized everything into a folder on my desk. I labeled it Ava, Wedding Contributions. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it yet. But I knew one thing. They weren't going to get away with this. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I woke up early that morning without an alarm, the way you do, when your body knows something is coming. I showered, dressed in a charcoal suit, and stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, adjusting details no one would notice. It wasn't about vanity, it was about control, about showing up properly, even when every instinct told me not to. I placed the gift bag by the door before leaving. Inside was a leather-bound wedding planner for Ava and a custom-engraved tie pin for Brandon. Thoughtful, not extravagant. A final attempt at civility. The venue was already buzzing when I arrived around 3:15. Staff moved with quiet urgency, straightening chairs, checking floral arrangements, whispering into headsets. The garden looked exactly like Ava had envisioned it. Gold accents, cascading flowers, everything staged for perfection. I made my way towards the family seating area and took a seat near the aisle. I was one of the first guests there. For a moment, sitting alone, I allowed myself to believe this might still be okay, that the ugliness would stay contained to small moments and private barbs. At 3:30, my parents arrived. They looked surprised to see me. Oh, my mother said, her voice careful. Danielle, you made it. I RSVP'd, I replied. Why wouldn't I? She smiled tightly and took a seat 2 rows ahead of me next to my father. Neither of them turned around again. The guests continued to trickle in. The violinist warmed up in the corner. The air smelled like flowers and anticipation. And then at 3:45, the wedding planner approached me. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you Danielle Ridley?" "Yes. I'm so sorry, but I've been asked to move you to the overflow seating area. Immediate family only in this section." I stared at her. "I'm the bride's sister." She hesitated. "I understand. I was just told to." "I paid $25,000 for this venue," I said quietly. "And you're asking me to move?" Her eyes widened. I don't know anything about that, ma'am." "It's fine," I said, already standing. "I'll move." She looked relieved, grateful I wasn't making her job harder. I walked to the back of the garden and took a seat behind a stone pillar near the catering station, partially obscured from view. My hands were shaking. I clasped them together and focused on breathing. 15 minutes later, Ava walked down the aisle. She looked radiant. Perfect. Like every image she'd curated of herself had finally come to life. I felt nothing. The ceremony passed quickly. Scripted vows, timed tears, applause on cue. I watched from the shadows like a stranger attending someone else's celebration. At the reception, I discovered my assigned seat was at a back table with Brandon's coworkers, people I'd never met. My parents sat near the head table. Ava's friends filled the center. Even a cousin I hadn't seen in years was seated closer than I was. Dinner came and went. Toasts were made. The DJ announced the first dance. I stayed seated. Then I noticed something that made my chest tighten. The gift bag I'd placed at the head table earlier was gone. I waited, scanning the room. When nothing turned up, I asked a server if she'd seen a small black bag with a gold ribbon. "Oh," she said. "The bride said it was a mistake and had it thrown out." Thrown out. My mouth went dry. I stepped outside into the cool night air and stood on the stone path behind the venue. Music thumped faintly through the walls. Laughter drifted out into the dark. That's when I knew. The wire transfer had been recalled successfully 2 hours earlier. The venue hadn't been paid. They just didn't know it yet. I left before the first dance. No one noticed. No texts. No calls. I sat in my car with the engine running for nearly an hour, staring at the road, feeling hollowed out. Then I drove home in silence. When I stepped into my apartment, clean and quiet and built entirely by my own effort, something finally broke. I slid down against the kitchen cabinets and let the weight of it all settle. Not rage, not grief. Loneliness. The kind that comes from realizing how thoroughly you've been erased from the people who were supposed to see you. The night of the wedding ended the way it always did for me, quietly, without witnesses. I woke up the next morning expecting something. Anger, relief, regret. Instead, there was only a heavy stillness, like the emotional equivalent of white noise. My phone was face down on the nightstand. I didn't reach for it right away. When I finally did, there were no missed calls, no messages. Not from Ava, not from my parents, not even a passive-aggressive hope you got home safe. I shouldn't have been surprised. Still, the absence landed harder than any confrontation would have. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, my phone rang. It was the venue's event manager. Her voice was polite, professional, carefully neutral. She wanted to follow up regarding the outstanding balance. Apparently, the wire transfer hadn't cleared, and they were trying to determine next steps. I told her the truth, calmly, clearly. "I recalled the transfer due to misrepresentation," I said. "I'm not responsible for the remaining balance. That responsibility lies with the bride and groom." There was a pause on the line. Not shock, not anger, just tired understanding. "I see," she said. "Thank you for clarifying." That was it. No drama, no argument. Just confirmation that the consequences had begun moving forward without me. That night, Ava finally texted. "Did something happen with the venue payment?" "They're saying it didn't go through. Can you call me?" No apology, no acknowledgement, just urgency. I didn't respond. The next morning, a message came through the family group chat. "Mom, Danielle. I don't know what you're doing, but Ava is extremely upset. You said you would help. It's not fair to back out now." I read it twice. Then I opened the chat history. It was a record of my adult life reduced to requests and expectations. Ava needed. Ava wanted. Ava deserved. And I delivered. Over and over. Quietly. Reliably. Until I was no longer a person, just a function. I exited the group chat. Then I blocked Ava's number. Then I turned my phone off. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to disappear without explanation. I spent the next week offline. No social media, no emails, no work calls. Just me. A stack of old paperbacks I hadn't touched in years, and long walks with no destination. I slept when I was tired. I ate when I was hungry. I let the silence exist without trying to fill it. Somewhere in that stillness, I noticed something unexpected. I was breathing easier. Midway through the week, I wandered into a small cafe a few blocks from my apartment, one I'd passed dozens of times without ever entering. The woman behind the counter introduced herself as Trina. She had a calm, observant way of speaking that put me at ease immediately. I became a regular without trying. We talked about books, about work, about nothing in particular. One morning, she mentioned her brother was trying to launch a small online business, but was struggling with the technical side. "You used to work in tech, right?" she asked. "I still do," I said. That conversation lingered with me. That night, I looked at the website her brother had built. It was rough, functional but clumsy. I spent an hour fixing it, just because I could. No expectations, no obligation. When I sent it back, his reply was long and grateful. He asked if I'd consider helping more. I declined, but I gave him tools, resources, guidance. Helping without being used felt different. I started checking my work email again. I'd missed a few inquiries. Instead of panicking, I responded deliberately. I hired a virtual assistant, set boundaries, streamlined everything. Within a month, I landed 2 new contracts. Both paid well. Both respected limits. And somewhere in that momentum, I met Daniel Harris. He wasn't flashy. He listened. He didn't ask what I could do for him. He asked how my day was and waited for the answer. It felt unfamiliar, safe, real. The silence from my family continued until the photos dropped. Ava's wedding photos flooded her feed exactly 1 month later. Perfect lighting, perfect smiles, captions about love and support and forever. I scrolled through every image. I wasn't in a single one, not even accidentally. That was when I understood. They didn't want me gone. They wanted the benefits of me without my presence. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. It was thick, cream-colored, expensive, in a way that didn't try to hide it. My name, Danielle Ridley, was printed neatly across the front in a serif font that immediately told me whoever sent it expected to be taken seriously. I opened it on my balcony with a mug of coffee cooling beside me, the city humming softly below. I wasn't anxious. Not yet. Just alert. Inside was a formal notice from the venue's legal department. They were holding me personally responsible for breach of contract. According to their records, I was listed as the financial guarantor for Ava and Brandon's wedding venue. The unpaid balance, $25,000, plus administrative fees. They cited my original wire transfer attempt as evidence of intent and accused me of rescinding payment in bad faith. I read it twice, then a third time. I had never signed a contract. Never agreed verbally or otherwise to guarantee anything. I had wired money, informally recalled it before it cleared, and made no promises beyond that. But according to this document, my name, my signature, my responsibility were all there in black ink. Someone had used my identity, and there was only one person who could have done it. I didn't panic, I didn't cry. I felt something colder settle into place, something precise. This wasn't family drama anymore, this was fraud. I gathered everything. Bank call logs, recall confirmations, text messages where Ava vaguely referenced helping without specifics. Then I found the contract itself. 2 signatures were required, one from the couple, one from the guarantor. The signature under my name wasn't mine. It looked similar enough to fool someone who didn't know me, but I know how I sign. I cross my letters a certain way. My signature slopes upward slightly. This one dipped. The pressure was wrong. The shape was wrong. I called Marissa Hale, my lawyer. She listened without interrupting, then said one sentence that made my stomach tighten. "Danielle, this is identity theft." At her request, I sent everything over. 2 days later, she called back. "We're not defending you," she said calmly. "We're protecting you, and then we're going on offense." Before she even drafted anything, I made another call to the venue's billing manager. Her name was Lillian. She sounded exhausted. "You're not the first person to question this," she admitted. After I explained, "We've had other vendors calling about unpaid balances they were told you were covering." I sat straighter. Vendors, the florist, the makeup team, the string quartet. They were all told your sister's payment was handled by Danielle. My hand tightened around my phone. I spent the next hour calling every vendor listed on Ava's wedding website. Most of them told the same story, informal promises, references to me, no signed agreement. Until I reached the photographer. He did have a contract, signed, with my forged signature. I sent everything to Marissa. Her response was immediate. "This isn't a misunderstanding," she said. "This is a pattern." That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I organized. I labeled files. I documented timelines. I built a case the way I'd built my business, carefully, thoroughly, without emotion clouding the facts. And when I was done, I realized something unsettling. Ava hadn't just assumed I'd pay. She had built her entire wedding on the certainty that I would never say no. That certainty was about to cost her everything. Marissa drafted the letters first. Clean, direct, unemotional. A cease and desist addressed to Ava and Brandon, warning them to immediately stop misrepresenting me as a financial guarantor in any dealings and outlining the legal consequences of continued fraud. Another letter went to the venue formally notifying them that my identity had been used without consent and that any claims against me were invalid. Then she looked at me over a video call and said, "Now we wait." Waiting has never been my strength, but this wasn't the kind of waiting that felt powerless. This was strategic. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, I received an email from Brandon. "Hey, Danielle. Not sure what's going on with the venue payment, but things are getting pretty stressful. Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Another message followed that evening. "They're threatening legal action. We assumed the venue was covered. Please call me." Assumed. That word did a lot of work. The next morning, Ava emailed me directly. No subject line, no greeting. "Why are vendors contacting us saying you're not paying? You promised to help. I don't understand why you're doing this." I read it once, then forwarded it to Marissa. Now she said we bait. I sent Ava a single email. Subject contract clarification. Ava, I've been contacted by multiple vendors regarding contracts and payments made in my name. Please confirm that you did not use my personal information or signature without my consent. If this is a misunderstanding, I'm willing to discuss it privately, but I need full transparency. Danielle. No accusations, no anger, just an opening. She responded within 2 hours. OMG, stop being dramatic. Everyone does this. It was just a placeholder. You said you were helping, so we assumed you'd cover a few things. Don't act like a victim now. Marissa highlighted the sentence in yellow when I sent it to her. We assumed you'd cover a few things. That's an admission, she said, not a smart one. While Ava was busy dismissing me, I took the next step. I reached out to the photographer, the one with the forged contract. His name was Caleb. I thanked him for sending the document and explained what had happened. He wasn't surprised. She was cold the entire day, he said, and she never paid the remaining balance, or tipped. I asked him one question. If this becomes public, will you deny what you sent me? No, he said without hesitation. I won't. Then I called Trina. She listened quietly, didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. When I finished, she asked one thing. What do you need? Names, I said, and ears. She had both. One of her regulars was a freelance journalist who occasionally wrote long-form pieces about lifestyle and money. Trina made the introduction. I didn't give details, just a pattern, a concept. Families that treat one member like a wallet. The journalist was interested. The final piece of the trap came together faster than I expected. I reached out to a small group of old college friends, developers, designers, people I trusted. I pitched the idea as a creative project, a short, anonymous web series exploring financial abuse within families. They were in immediately. We built the site in a week. Sleek, anonymous, clean. We called it the Invisible ATM. Episode 1 dropped on a Friday night. The 25,000 wedding I wasn't invited to. Names changed, faces blurred, but the details were precise. By Sunday, it had over 30,000 views. By Monday, it was trending, and Ava still had no idea what she'd walked into. Ava called me on a Tuesday morning. I knew it was her before I even looked at the screen. The timing was too precise, the silence too loud beforehand. I let it ring twice before answering, not out of cruelty, but because I needed one last second to steady myself. Her voice was unrecognizable. Gone was the sharp confidence, the dismissive edge she'd worn like armor for years. What replaced it was breathless, strained, as if she'd been running and hadn't stopped long enough to breathe. Danielle, she said, What did you do? I was sitting at my kitchen table laptop, open coffee cooling beside me. On the screen was an analytics dashboard for the Invisible ATM. 250,000 views in under 10 days. Hundreds of comments. People weren't just watching, they were talking, sharing, naming the pattern. I told a story, I said calmly. You made me look like a criminal, she snapped. I raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't see it. Did I name you? There was a pause. Too long. People had connected the dots. Brandon's boss had seen it. Clients at Ava's salon had started asking questions. Vendors were whispering. Her mother-in-law wouldn't stop calling. The image she'd spent years curating was cracking, and she didn't know how to stop it. You weren't supposed to take it this far, she said, her voice dropping. It was just a wedding. You said you'd help. You didn't ask, I replied. You assumed. You forged my name. You built an entire financial plan on my silence. She inhaled sharply. Do you know the pressure I was under? Brandon's family is loaded. They were judging me. I was drowning. And you decided to push my head under instead, I said. The line went quiet. Then she asked the question she'd always used to reset the balance of power. What do you want? I didn't hesitate. I want you to face the consequences. She laughed, brittle and hollow. You're going to sue me. No, I said, but someone else already is. Because what Ava didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that the venue had reviewed Marissa's documentation, the forged signatures, the emails, the pattern of misrepresentation, and instead of pursuing me, they had filed suit against Ava and Brandon for fraud and breach of contract. The vendors followed. 3 small claims cases, 1 civil suit. Brandon's promotion was put on indefinite hold. Ava's salon lost clients. She made her social media accounts private. The wedding vendors' community quietly blacklisted her. I never said her name. I didn't have to. The truth did the work for me. The last time my mother reached out, it wasn't a call. It was a letter. Handwritten. 3 pages. Folded carefully like effort alone could compensate for what the words refused to say outright. I recognized her handwriting immediately, the deliberate curves, the way she pressed harder when she wanted to sound sincere. She wrote about how difficult the past few weeks had been, about how families make mistakes, about how no one ever meant for things to go this far. She said she hoped we could all move forward, that holding on to resentment would only hurt everyone involved. There was no mention of the forged signatures, no acknowledgement of the lies, no apology. Just the familiar expectation that I would absorb the discomfort so everyone else could feel better. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the letter to Marissa, who skimmed it and laughed softly. Image management, she said. Classic. By then, the fallout had settled into something quieter but permanent. Ava and Brandon settled with the venue out of court. Expensively. They took out a personal loan to cover the damages. I heard through people who heard through people that Ava sold her engagement ring to help pay part of it off. Brandon's social media went dark. The gym selfies disappeared. The captions about hustle and success evaporated. The dream wedding became a financial sinkhole, and I rebuilt. Not out of spite, out of necessity. I hired 2 new people at my firm. I started mentoring again, teaching younger developers not just how to protect their code, but how to protect themselves from bad clients, bad contracts, and bad relationships disguised as obligation. I took weekends off, joined a book club, let myself be seen without shrinking. Daniel stayed, not because I needed him to, but because he wanted to. He never asked me to forgive, never asked me to explain. He just listened, and then he showed up again the next day. The invisible ATM kept circulating long after I stopped checking the metrics. The journalist Trina introduced me to published a feature about financial abuse within families, anonymous but devastatingly accurate. People shared their own stories. Siblings who paid debts they never owed. Children who funded lifestyles they were excluded from. People like me, finally recognizing the pattern for what it was. I never claimed credit. I didn't need to. 2 months later, I received a voicemail from Ava. Her voice sounded flat, exhausted. I don't even know who you are anymore, she said. You've changed. She meant it as an insult. I took it as confirmation. Because she was right. I had changed. I no longer equated love with sacrifice. I no longer mistook silence for peace. I no longer believed that being useful was the same as being valued. I didn't get an apology. I didn't need one. I got my life back. And for the first time, I chose myself without guilt, without explanation, and without looking back.